Hi guys, and welcome to our second SA Rugby Magazine Zoom chat. I'm here again with Wade Pretorius. Wade, I know you're keeping well in lockdown, and we want to just chat briefly about our world team selections that have been on the site over the last couple of days. And I think a lot of people have commented wondering just why you've picked no Springboks in your World 15. So I'm going to hand the ball straight to you and ask what your reasoning was behind there, and maybe some explanation.
Yeah, we saw that this feature got picked up by stuff.co.za in New Zealand, and they said I bravely omitted the Springboks. I didn't bravely omit the Springboks. Sorry about that. I opted not to select the Springboks because I had it in my mind the world team is everyone but South Africa, and then they will play against my all-time South African side. So that's the reason why I left out the Springboks. And that said, I think only 3 or 4 books would actually make this team. I don't know which is more controversial, leaving them out altogether or saying that only maximum 4 would make my world side.
Yeah, I don't think we had too many points of difference. I know we probably will get to the argument over whether or not to include Brodie Retallick, because I was a firm believer in that and you went another route. But maybe if we just touch on scrum half. Obviously, I was of a different mindset. I included Springboks in my world team. I thought Thierry Dusautoir definitely had to be included. Some have said maybe it should have been Joost instead of him. And obviously, you went with George Gregan, not picking any box. But are there any other scrum halves who stand out for you, or are you just a big Gregan fan? Is that why you went that way, and not someone like Conor Murray from Ireland?
No, I don't think Conor Murray enters this equation. I like my 2 halfbacks. I've got Gregan starting and Justin Marshall on my bench from New Zealand. Both players storied careers with their national teams. Gregan's got his CV, his track record, said it all. I think that anytime you have a kind of abrasive scrum of someone who really gets under the skin, and that then adds that with all the winning medals that he's got, I think that means you can stand out in your career. There weren't too many more great number 9s. I think South Africa's been blessed with obviously Joost and then Thierry Dusautoir, but beyond them, George Gregan, Justin Marshall, I'm not too sure who else would enter the equation. Maybe someone like Matt Dawson or someone like that. But I mean, I'm very happy with Gregan and Marshall as my 2 picks. I think those are rock solid at 9.
Yeah. And then probably the other talking point we had in our world teams, both of us going with Thierry Dusautoir from France, who I thought maybe some people would go another route. The other 2 selections on the loose trio, we almost automatically went with Kieran Reid and Richie McCaw. That's probably why the New Zealand website were quite big fans of our world teams that had quite a few Kiwis. But Dusautoir, for you, I mean, what are your memories of him? Because for me, it was just this kind of legendary French captain, rather, one who was just this like machine tackler. I just enjoyed the way he played the game. And for French teams that are generally renowned for flair, I think he was just your typical hardworking flank, a guy who I think would add value in any world team.
Yeah, I think it's important when you look at a world team, you look at all the countries, and then Dusautoir stood out over those 2 World Cups when he single-handedly dragged France to the top of the game. I mean, he was a colossal player. He was in the mold of, if I'm going to leave out South Africans, he was almost South African-esque in the fact that he carried the ball so strongly. He was an amazing defensive unit, and for me, what I actually liked was his work at the breakdown. I think that was sort of always played second to the amount of tackles that he made over those 2 World Cups where he starred for France. I mean, I think Dusautoir will come into any equation. Flanks is always going to be subjective because of impact on the game. No one can dispute our Reid and McCaw selections. So 7 was always going to be somewhere where people might have differed. But I've gone Dusautoir. Dylan Jack went Dusautoir. And Mariette Adams, another one of our staffers, she went Jerry Collins, who could have come into the equation. But I was very happy with Dusautoir to start. And my bench has George Smith, the Aussie turnover machine, guy that had a little bit more flair towards the end of his career. So, yeah, I really gave my 23, shout out to Rassie Erasmus with his bomb squad theory. I gave my 23 a real impact. And, yeah, I'm very happy with Dusautoir. I mean, does anyone come to mind that you were wrestling with?
probably there. I was quite tempted to go with Schalk Burger in my starting lineup, but then again, I thought he would add impact. That's why I have him on my bench, because I think he's a great bench option. I quite like George Smith. I mean, he's another guy who stands out. So yeah, those are a good couple of options. But yeah, it was one of those you can wrestle and you can go back and forth looking at test caps and stats and stuff. You can do it for ages. But I mean, that's the whole point of these pieces, is to generate debate, and that's what we did with our lock selection. You having a bit of a dip at me for going with Retallick, but for me, Brodie Retallick's the guy that the All Blacks really, I think, showed how much value they placed in him by taking him to the World Cup, even though he had an injury. They thought he wouldn't play in the pool stages, and yet they still took him just because they wanted him to be ready for the quarterfinals onwards. I know you have a different point of view because you think the All Blacks muddled their selections at the World Cup, but
They did.
have a go on that one, and why you went with Martin Johnson and John Eales.
Okay, yeah. So let's firstly just put this whole New Zealand just make great decisions thing to bed. They don't, because they played Beauden Barrett out of position. That backfired spectacularly at the World Cup, and they didn't pick Owen Franks, who makes my front row, as a starter. They didn't even send him to the World Cup. So their selection process is not always great. I'm not saying Brodie Retallick's rubbish. I mean, he's one of the best players in the world right now, but for me, I don't see him out and out as the best player in the world now. So if he's not the best player in the world now, the best lock, should I say, then he can't come into the equation as this all-time thing, this all-time selection. I've got John Eales, the Australian great, and I've got Martin Johnson, one of England's best ever. You probably put him in your top 5 easily, Martin Johnson, in the all-time English players. So for me, I've gone with guys that have been there, done that, got the track record, signed off at the top of the game. Retallick has got a good few years ahead of him, where he will go on to prove that he is a world beater, and he might very well make this team in 3-4 years' time. But right now, would he even make the Springboks? That's the question that I had to pose to myself. You think he would with Evan? I'm not so sure. I think we've got 4 magnificent locks who sometimes you wonder, Rassie could have mixed them any which way they wanted and got the same results.
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing. I mean, there are probably in most positions when you're picking an all-time world 15 or world 23 where you could go with one or the other and you actually wouldn't really lose anything. I mean, that's the sort of thing that makes it so interesting when we look at, who you ultimately go with based on sometimes what is just a gut feeling or a personal bias or preference. Let's just touch on one final thing with the World 15s on the bench. I don't know if there were any real major controversies, but guys that I chose that maybe was slightly different to everyone else was I've got Stephen Larkham there as my fly half replacement and Cheslin Colby as the one bolter. I just thought he's the perfect impact player to come off the bench. And from your side, you went another route, Jonny Wilkinson and David Campese.
Yeah, Jonny Wilkinson over Stephen Larkham all day for me. I mean, Johnny was one of the best. I mean, sure, Dan Carter was utter world class and everything he did touch to goal. Jonny Wilkinson was there and thereabouts. He was a tremendous tackler in his own right, so no one got through his channel. Extremely reliable with the boot and a great all-round footballer. So Larkham was obviously very good for Australia and he was part of that successful Brumbies era. But for me, Johnny takes Larkham all day. They both can play 10 and 12, so there's both ticking and pats on the backsides there. But I for one have Jonny Wilkinson. I couldn't think of anybody better. If Dan Carter went down, to bring on Jonny Wilkinson, a guy that knows how to do the business in the ultimate pressure situations. Yeah. And then you've got Colby, obviously. I mean, he's a hot stepper. He's right now one of the most talked about players on the planet. He's still got a long way to go to prove that he's a Springbok great. And therefore, I've gone David Campese, who the whole world knows as the goose stepper, as someone who scored just loads of tries for Australia. His era thing may have counted against him. A lot of people have shifted towards a more modern thinking in this team. But I've gone Campese. He left his mark on the game. He was there long enough in the professional era, and I think he's a solid she's a solid pick on the bench, considering he does cover 14 and 15.
All right. Before you carry on waffling on, let me move our point of conversation to another series we got going on the website, which is looking at if rugby does have a reboot and restructure after the lockdown period, what we hope to see the game looking like after that. So I kicked things off today looking at how I would hope to see a streamlined Super 10, which would be a return to a sort of competition we've had many years ago. But in a different sense, I would hope to have 3 South African sides, one team going into the Northern Hemisphere to kind of get the best of both worlds. The Kiwis reducing their Super Rugby teams from 5 to 4. Australia cut in half from 4 to just 2 teams. And then you add, or you keep at least, Argentina's Jaguars team. You have a Super 10, straight round robin, into a semi and a final. Boom, done and dusted. A competition that would last 12 weeks. Maybe not all fair in terms of travel, but I mean, South African players are used to that. For me, that would be a tournament that I would get excited by, because at the moment I'm missing live rugby, but I'm not particularly missing Super Rugby as we know it. You know, that competition for a long time has been getting a bit stale.
Yeah. Coming from a man who's got such a Sharks bias, and with them dominating so well, I'm surprised to hear you say that. But your suggestion, I mean, I even went on Twitter to give you a little shout out there, so it must be a good one if I can agree to it. I'm quite cynical. The plan is great all the way up until you've got to get the TV rights deals done, and you can see why they went to so many teams, because it's all about the money. And again, that is one of the reasons why rugby does need a reboot, is because with Australia in huge financial distress, New Zealand, we yet to see the full impact on South Africa. The pro rugby era has been phenomenal, and it's enriched a lot of players' lives, and that does go down, but it's not sustainable. The competition that you've just mentioned is, it's less impact on the bodies, it's less travel. I know it doesn't suit South Africa because we will have to go and play the Crusaders and the Hurricanes away from home every second year or whatever. But it's a great suggestion. I would just worry about getting it over the line when it comes to TV rights. That's the big hiccup to your proposal. I don't know if you've got anything to add on that point.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a series where we're looking into a crystal ball and a perfect world scenario. So, I mean, the likelihoods are always difficult, but I just think at this time when you're going, the game almost starts afresh, you know, in many regards. The unions and governing bodies that are almost going bankrupt, having to have bailouts. You know, you never actually know what the game could look like. And if they wipe the slate clean and go, we have to now redo this whole thing, I'm just thinking of what tournaments would excite me. So to have, you know, guys like the Kings and Cheetahs in the Pro 14, maybe have another South African team lobby to join them or to join the Premiership, still keep a Super Rugby competition going, because I love watching us play the Kiwi teams, but just in a shorter, sharper tournament. That for me is appealing, because I think as fans, we're looking for something a little bit fresh, a little bit different, not so much something that goes on and on and on for 5 months of the year.
Yeah.
So I think we'll tackle it. I know you're coming up with your idea this week as well, and then we'll catch up again for another Zoom chat soon.
Looking forward to it.
Cheers.